Alright friends, hello, this is Wire Guitars, obviously, or maybe not obviously, because I did recently get a haircut, as maybe some of you might recognize, or not recognize, and that is why I introduced myself in the first place, coming at you guys with a live replay commentary. So I suppose it's not live, because it's a replay, but it's live in the sense that I'll be looking at the replay live with you guys, although I don't know how I would do that otherwise. So, with that conundrum out of the way, I'm going to be playing Broodmother. This is a game in which I believe I third or fourth picked her, as I often do in my ranked games. And we're going to be focusing on trying to stay as calm as possible. Now I want to start off by saying, and I guess really emphasizing that point that I just mentioned, which is that I will be trying to be as quiet and calm as possible, because I want to try to merge two of the things that I personally enjoy the most on YouTube, which is educational Dota videos and ASMR. And if you don't know what ASMR is, that's fine. I won't tell you what it is, because truth be told, the acronym, or abbreviation rather, often escapes me. It stands for like Autonomous Sensory Meridian Response or something along those lines. All we really need to focus on is that I'm going to try to be as calm and collected as possible. Now this doesn't necessarily mean that I'll be speaking eloquently. I may stutter, I may misspeak, but the focus here will be that I am going to try to speak in such a manner that is calming and perhaps in some way cathartic to some of you. Now I understand that my voice, like many people's voices, probably isn't necessarily attuned to something of this nature. Furthermore, I don't have proper sound equipment to start an ASMR channel, I don't think. I've got some really dinky webcam that I bought for $30 a few years back that is probably in many ways, I don't want to say broken, because it's obviously working at least with some success, but maybe not up to snuff for today's standards of what one might consider to be a good piece of recording equipment. But the focus here is really just on the attempt, because that's what we do around here. We try our best, and if we succeed, all the better. And if we don't, we learn from our mistakes. And so, with that being said, I'm coming at you guys, as I mentioned before, with the Broodmother game. This right here is a very unfortunate situation that some of you may find yourselves in, where you have to eat a tree to get out because you were derping around in them for too long, and you realize that you hopped off your webs. I want to note that this game is a little bit of a funny one, because whereas this originally does kind of seem to be a try-lane, it quickly becomes a one-on-one. And when I say a one-on-one, I'm referencing that it's a one-on-one with a Broodmother against an Ursa. And some of you, and by some of you I mean like 3 of you out there that actually do play Broodmother, are probably already laughing. But in case you don't play Broodmother and instead only watch me for my Urspirit content, and I mean, quite honestly, thank you very much for even watching this video, because I thought most of you would have died by now. But if you don't know, Broodmother quite literally eats that bear for breakfast, especially in a 1v1 scenario where he doesn't need to worry about anybody else. And so, as to not spoil too much, we'll be doing that very thing in a few minutes, very shortly, one might say. But for now, we're just chillaxing, trying to get level 4, trying to make it in such a way that I can get spiders up without having to worry about feeding them to some form of a dust gank by their, Venge Techies combo. It can be quite deadly when you have a reliable stun in Techies who has Blast Off, which is about a 400 damage nuke in the early game, which is quite powerful, as hopefully anybody can imagine. So we're doing the standard thing here, where I expected to be against at least a dual lane, and as a result, I determined that spiders are a pretty good thing to get here, so I get the Soul Ring double sentry build, where I can control the lane with sentries in case they buy their own sentries. In the case that they only start dust, then all I have to do is avoid the dust and never find myself in too precarious of a scenario, like we just saw there. I also had the added benefit of being able to snipe a courier. And we do the Soul Ring recipe, and continuing with what I was mentioning about item builds, because I have determined that this is a good lane to go spiders in. So we start the Soul Ring recipe so that we can obviously just complete it in the side shop, which is available right over there, as opposed to having to use the courier and waiting and disrupting my team's flow. I want to be as self-sufficient as possible, especially in the offlane. So right here, especially as I hit level 4, I want to create spiders and throw them on the bear, even if he has a poor man's shield, which he doesn't. I believe at this point in time he only has a stout shield. But even if he had a poor man's shield, it creates that little bit of a harass zone where it's very difficult for him to do anything. Right here I get a little bit lucky, and I actually kind of want to show you guys a little bit of a trick with Broodmother. I don't really feel like I demonstrated it all that well here, and you'll see that I kind of got this kill by some amount of luck. Maybe if he was attack moving there, he might have aggroed onto me. It's kind of hard to say. I know the spiders have priority as well, so maybe he would have aggroed onto the spiders, so I think that was a little bit of a potential for outplay. But I want to go back if I can. Hopefully this doesn't make too much noise for those of you that are starting to fall a little sleepy-eyed. What you can actually do as Broodmother is, if you're getting injured and you're noticing that you're getting the spin web slow movement speed as I'm getting hit right here, what you can actually do is you can step off your webs for a very brief moment in time, and it will actually get rid of the spin web slow debuff because you're off of your spin webs. And then, this is somewhat similar to if you were to exchange your blink dagger from your backpack to your main inventory. If you cast a web and are not getting damaged in that moment of time at which you're off your webs, you'll completely refresh the spin web slow debuff, allowing you to phase through the trees as though you hadn't been hit in the last 8 seconds. Now this is a somewhat risky maneuver, and especially if he had an Orb of Venom, the Ursa, then it wouldn't have been possible in this instance. But I think I could have pulled it off and made this a little bit less of a scary rotation, or scary dive for me to sustain. In any case, we broke his ankles, and we sent him back to Fountain. Call me Michael Jordan. Or don't. I'm not your parent. Anyways, so we happily go back to farming, knowing that we're 484 gold richer, also that he wasted both of his dusts, and now we're just having fun. For the record, I do apologize if my computer sounds as though it's a bit of a jet stream. I am in fact actually operating off of I was going to say an airplane jet, but I feel like I already made that joke, so it was lame. I'm sorry. I'm not the funniest human being in the world, but I am a pretty good Dota player. I'd like to think so anyways, and that's what we're here for. So anyways, I completed my Medallion of Courage and I bought a TP. You'll notice I haven't had to use any of my sentries, and that might come into play later. If it doesn't, then, you know, quality memes. But if it does, then that's one more reason to hold on to your sentries if you don't see your opponents having sentries or using sentries in the early game. As a Broodmother, you don't often just want to walk into lane and assume that there's 2 sentries down in the lane that you're in, and waste your sentries as a result, because they could come in handy later. Again, this is mostly information for the future, and I'm not saying that they will come into play, but they could, and that's important to note. So here, we're just getting a free kill. I don't think I die in response because, of course, they don't have dust. But if they did, I would die. I actually kind of scared myself there a little bit because I walked off my webs because I was just so convinced that they had dust, but I should have known that I wasn't going to die in that instance, because if they did have dust, they would have used it immediately. And so here, that was a quality meme. They recently nerfed techies' proximity mines from 30 to a 50 gold bounty if you kill them, so getting the kill on them is actually quite significant. Right there I just disjointed some tower shots. Even if it looked like I took the tower shots there, I didn't, because you can just draw aggro from the tower and then get out of the vision of what they have for true sight, which will disjoint the tower shots. Right here, Techies jumps, and I was pretty aware of his presence just around in that general vicinity, so I didn't want to go on him as a result. Ursa buys back, which made me feel really happy. I actually probably fed a few more spiders to that Techies' proximity mines than I needed to. I even probably could have sniped it. I have fairly little experience, specifically as Broodmother against Techies. I don't see him as much as I feel like other people do. I know he's a really good hero right now, and as a quick side note, if you want to gain easy MMR and you don't want to play Broodmother, play Techies, because he's a pretty powerful hero. But I'm still learning, and I do believe I learned a fair bit this game, and we'll talk about that when those instances come up. So I want to go ahead and bring up the last hits and denies tab, and I actually want to switch it back to the old view because the new view is stupid, and if you don't think that, then you're stupid. You'll notice I have 32 last hits and it swapped. 33 last hits and 1 deny. This isn't by any means amazing farm for a free farming hero, but you have to keep in mind that I wasn't a free farming hero for the first few minutes of the game. This, by the way, was what I was talking about with playing against Techies. I should have kept in mind that there is a Techies in the game and that he could be sitting top and splicing mines, so we got a bunch of free gold there. Now, how much, you might ask? You might be like, oh, Techies just shot up to 1000 GPM. No, he didn't. Keep in mind Spiders do feed a bit of gold, but by no means did he get fat, filthy rich. He's currently, before he took this wave, at 202 GPM. I predict those spiders gave him a grand total of maybe 200 net worth. We can go ahead and check that. Yep, he's at 1700 net worth. We could actually specifically go back in time to check the amount of net worth specifically if you don't believe me, but I promise you that it was by no means a huge deal that he fed off those spiders. Just one of those things where he didn't need to, and I probably shouldn't have let him. But this common misconception where if Broodmother's feeding any number of spiders whatsoever that the game is lost and she is a terrible hero as a result of this needs to stop, because I fall into too many ranked Broodmother games, and actually some other people and members of the community that play Broodmother, I'm not going to mention any names, but have the same issue, and I'm trying to shed light on this problem that is seemingly running rampant of Broodmother players, is that we get blamed for feeding a few spiders even if we're owning our lane and probably costing the enemy more gold than they're making. Anyways, focusing on two things at once here. I want to farm the wave and stay in EXP range, but I also want to get the last hit on this tower. We fail at getting the last hit of the tower, but as I mentioned before, we're human and we all make mistakes. Didn't fail at getting farm though, and that's really kind of the big goal here, is that even if we're missing last hits on towers, we're still farming and pushing as quickly as possible and as hard as possible, such that we can create as much space and pull rotations up here. This will bring some of the aggression off of my team and allow me to do the role that Broodmother kind of is originally meant to make, or do rather, or perform, if you will, around the first, say, 20 minutes of the game. Some are more, some are less, especially from the offlane position. So Shadow Fiend comes up here, and now it's especially bad to feed Shadow Fiend the Spiderlings and slash Spiderites for the obvious reason that he gets souls when he kills one of them. If you didn't know about that interaction, now you do. And it's definitely not something that you want to do, especially if he just dies and comes into the lane, because that's one of the big downsides for Shadow Fiend, is that every time he dies he needs to, well, he usually does need to farm such that he can get back to his optimal damage count of souls, such that he can contribute to his team in team fights. It's very, it could be said that Shadow Fiend's buyback is worse than other heroes similar to Earth Spirits, because when he buys back he still has to, or he's not in peak performance like other heroes. He's down about 30 or 40 damage of what he could be at. That being said, he's going to have to worry about that because I just killed him, because I noticed that he used his short range raise. Again, we could go back in time, but I'd rather not do that, and I want to kind of keep this replay as short as possible. It will, for the record, be about 30 to 40 minutes, so you will get some nice ASMR goodness. 50 minutes. We'll see. It's not really a 50-minute replay, right? 53-minute replay, but if the last 10 minutes are us fountain diving and BMing them in all chat, is it really 50 minutes? I don't think we did that, by the way. Fun fact about this game, though, I actually did get sent to low priority right after it. Don't play Broodmother in solo queue if you're not a fan of low priority. Kappa. Anyways, we're focusing on getting the last hit with our spiders while we collect the bounty rune. We get the bounty rune, and we get the last hit on the tower. Feels pretty good, man. 6,500 net worth at 10 minutes into the game. You could equate that to about 600 GPM since you start with 600. Gold, so it's about 600 GPM. And like I said, feels pretty good, man. Obviously, this is something that you can expect from a relatively free-farming Brood who's also getting kills in her lane. Specifically, I'm up to 5-0. Should I have gotten all of the kills that I did? Definitely not. Should I have gotten away with as many kills as I did, in the sense that should I have died in return for some of them? Probably. But keep in mind, this is a 5.2 or 3k average rank game, and if you're playing Broodmother at anywhere near this bracket, you can probably expect similar results in some of your games. Now right here I actually disconnect, which is really unfortunate. I don't actually know what happened. If I was Chalanqua, I would mention, I had just said earlier that I wasn't going to mention any names, but if I was Chalanqua, I would call this a distributed denial of service attack on my viewing apparatus or internet apparatus. I am not, and so I will simply admit that perhaps I don't have the best of internets. Either way, in any case, I disconnect, and obviously this is one of those things that you don't have to count on happening to you every game unless you have a crap internet. I'd like to think that I don't, but I randomly got this disconnect, so I'm going to assume that this had something to do on my end and not something to do on, say, a DDoS attack. I apologize for the cough. Maybe I'll edit that out. So we come back, and we're still a little bit dazed, if you will, in the sense that our internet connection is still a little fuzzy, and we're not entirely connected. I guess a word that I'm looking for is maybe distraught, and you can probably recognize that by the fact that I'm not entirely ready to click around and go back to a lane and farm. I'm testing my internet connection out right now. Again, I've lost about the last 2 minutes of complete free farm to this somewhat unfortunate circumstance, so you don't necessarily have to count on this happening to you in your games. And I do apologize for the record that this kind of takes away a little bit from the educational content. I don't want to skip ahead because I do want to show the impact that it had. We are still looking at it at times too, so you kind of, don't have to watch the entire thing, but you get a little idea of like how much further I could potentially be. Again, by no means am I trying to stroke my own ego, but I'm just trying to let you guys know that if you're playing Broodmother, you can shave off a few minutes. Maybe this in some ways makes up for the 5 kills that I shouldn't maybe have gotten all of in my lane. In any case, Ursa's trying to solo Roshan, and I actually do believe that he gets it, which is unfortunate. As Broodmother, it's fairly easy to scout those sorts of things, so you just need to put a spider in there and make sure he doesn't take it. Actually, I don't think he does. Do we have something there? It looks like we have something of vision in there. I do apologize. I actually just played a game with an Ursa in it that actually did take Roshan. I wasn't playing Broodmother. I was actually in low priority, as I mentioned. Still trying to get myself out of those games. But I can't remember what hero I was. Maybe it was like Beastmaster or some other hero that can scout Rosh. But there was an Ursa in it that did actually take Roshan fairly early after he lost his lane, so I may be mistaking it for that game. In any case, playing Broodmother and getting a 14-minute Radiance feels really good, man. This is the typical build that I go, as I've talked about, and you've no doubt, if you watch my videos, know about. I almost die here, but through force of will, I do not. In all seriousness, I had a little bit of a micro fail there, where I directed my spiders up there top and didn't realize where my hero was going. The team had my back there, though, and we cleaned up that team fight pretty well. Really nothing mechanically to look at in terms of that team fight. I just kind of made a mistake, and my teammates were able to follow up and make it a mistake into a positive. I definitely owe that to my team there, more so than anything. I guess you could argue that running away was a pretty good play there, but who wouldn't have? Here I'm a little bit too close to the Slardar, but I still don't die, which is actually quite amazing, especially given how much of a net worth lead that I have over them. I would think that I'd be the first target to be focused in every single team fight, also especially because I have a Radiance. So right here, I'm sitting actually in a very good spot for Broodmother to stand if she has a Radiance. Stand in the trees that are nearby, burn the targets that you need to, and right here I'm thinking, man, this is a really easy kill on this Ursa. He's walking around me, he's still in Radiance burn range, but he's never ever going to be able to attack me. So as long as I get like a +1, we can probably kill him. Here I decide to kind of chase him down, and this really just goes to show where Radiance is very powerful. I even made him pop a dust. I don't know if I get the kill there, in fact I don't think I do, but we pop a dust, 2 dusts make that. Techies had to use his suicide, bringing him back down to half HP, and that pretty much caused no form of investment out of me, unless you call Radiance an investment, which I definitely would, but I would simply call it one that definitely pays off. You can make plays like that and stay relatively safe whilst doing it. Oftentimes that'll actually even get you the kill, because 60 burn damage at this stage of the game is very powerful. Here, you'll see why I like Solar Crest as an item choice. It allows for very early Roshans. Against an Ursa lineup, as we talked about earlier, you want to be sure that you're either controlling Roshan or taking Roshan, which is a form of controlling it early and often. If you can't, it's not necessarily the end of the world. Ursa doesn't win the game off of Roshan, but it definitely helps him snowball a lead. And it often is what catapults him into his ability to take early objectives with his team, which will win the game for him, and is actually how he does win games. So here, I, again, am learning as to how I should be playing against techies, and I'm starting to figure out, maybe just moving all of my spiders and myself around isn't the best idea, because I guess he could be just randomly sitting in trees planting red mines. I don't actually know how I got in there. Maybe he blasted off into the middle of them, but I don't think he did, because some trees died around, which means that trees weren't there originally, so I don't actually know how he got in there. But either way, I should be sending spiders individually forth every single time I go in. Here I'm just 3-shotting the Venge, but I don't think I actually get the opportunity to finish her. You can see there where just a little bit of extra attack speed maybe from treads would be really nice, but the courier actually isn't in flight right now, so maybe I should be calling my treads. I'm focused on the combat at hand though. I do think I go down here, which is very unfortunate, 752 gold to one of the worst targets that it could go towards, but we do clean him up. I don't think we get this Slardar kill, but this still does enable us to push for a little bit, because the Ursa does die. Jug is diving, and with his magic immunity, he makes this quite easy. The unfortunate element of this is that we just don't have any follow-up from our team, and you'll actually look, this is through my vision. I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, guys, Jug has Aegis, why aren't we maybe just trying to get over there? I know there's a tier 2 tower separating you guys, but it shouldn't surely be that hard. My Ricky's farming bottom, and I'm like, this is really making me think right now. I've got to wonder, why would my Ricky be farming bottom? Regardless, if we don't want to group as 5, I'd rather just go farm up, try to get my items. Treads is obviously, as I mentioned earlier, a very solid choice. On Broodmother, more so than a lot of other heroes, I would recommend getting treads after you get your Radiance or after you get your Solar Crest. Some people argue that boots too, unless you're going for something like Phase or Arcanes, really doesn't really mean too much. I guess bots as well. Basically, some people argue that treads overall as an item isn't necessarily that big of an item, and it doesn't really add too much. I know this may sound archaic, but think of like Storm Spirits and a lot of other heroes that are in the game that favor skipping treads in favor of other items that actually do things. Some people consider treads to be somewhat of a greedy item, actually, for that very reason, where it just gives you stats and a bit of attack speed. If that is true, and I'm not here to say that treads needs a buff, I would argue that especially on Broodmother, it doesn't necessarily matter how much of an item, or I guess non-item, that treads is, in the sense that, yeah, it gives you for 500 gold a way to give yourself 9 extra bonus stats and 25 attack speed, because that definitely pays off for at least Broodmother. I would say it makes sense that treads could be a bit of a redundant item on a hero like, say, Nature's Prophet, for instance, which is a hero that actually a lot of people have the conception that treads is a really good item on. I would say that in the case of Nature's Prophet, treads seems to be a little redundant sometimes, because the 9 extra bonus stats that you get from treads isn't really all that meaningful. You could argue in the early game it helps you get a lot of ganks going, but I would argue that there's many other items that you could be buying in the early game to catapult your ganks, especially if you're doing it from the jungle. Something like Phase Boots helps you get in range for some more auto attacks, which is probably a little bit more crucial than something like treads. Same thing for an item like Urn. A lot of people underestimate Urn on a hero like Nature's Prophet. I'm going to digress a little bit because I don't want to make this video all about Nature's Prophet or even really talk about him too much. I'm just trying to say that some people have the conception that treads is a bit of a redundant item. And I would actually kind of agree with that notion a bit. It just kind of gives you some extra stats and attack speed. It doesn't make your boots any quicker, which is another common misconception that people have about treads. It still only gives you the same 45 movement speed that you get from boots. But what makes it incredibly amazing on a hero like Broodmother is that it gives you, for one, the ability to tread swap, which is very powerful for so many reasons that I don't really think I need to go into. Just understand that especially on a hero like Broodmother, who actually does benefit from lifesteal, switching to agility becomes that much more powerful, especially when it's as much lifesteal and she gets as much bonus damage on her ulti as she does. So getting that extra bit of attack speed that you desperately crave is very important. Plus, that extra little bit of attack speed that the treads innately provide, which is 25, is very, very amazing as well. In total, you're getting about 30, you're getting 36 flat attack speed if you're on attack speed treads, and when you're popping your ulti, every little bit of attack speed really makes the difference. Now, with all that being said, I next opt for BKB because Slardar is quite annoying. Techies is quite annoying. In fact, I would argue I think Techies was my main reason for going BKB here. Slardar isn't a hero that I would necessarily by itself say that BKB is necessary for. He can still reapply his ulti onto you if he has it applied and you BKB to purge it off. So for that reason alone, it's not necessarily an amazing item. Basically what I'm trying to say is amp damage, or whatever it's called now. I know they recently changed the ability names. Amp damage alone isn't enough of a reason for me to go BKB. But the addition of Techies, being a hero that draws typically games out to the 40, 50, 60, 70, 3-hour, 5-year game mark, isn't something that I'm really keen on doing when they have a composition of heroes that really favors one damage type, specifically with the minus armor from Shadow Fiend, Slardar reducing armor, and Ursa being able to take advantage of that. They're not necessarily a team that I would say outscales us, but they're definitely a team that I am a little bit fearful of. Also, with that being said, BKB just kind of helps in general, like against every single one of their heroes in some way, shape, or form. In the form of Ursa, I can prevent myself from getting slowed if he does, and I do believe he does eventually get an Orb of Venom. No. So I guess he has an Elm of the Dominator, which it does help against that creep. It helps against Ursa the least, which is why I mentioned him first, but more specifically, it prevents Shadow Fiend's ulti if I apply it afterwards. It allows me to purge off his ulti debuff. If I apply it prior, then even though I still get debuffed by his ulti, and I did look up this interaction for the record, so you know this is factual information, but either way it helps me against his ulti. It doesn't completely negate it, because either I apply it afterwards and I purge off the debuff but still take the damage from the ulti, or I play it beforehand, in which case I don't take any of the damage and can go man-fight him, but then afterwards, after he pops his ulti does pure spell immunity for the debuff. The damage doesn't, the debuff does, so I will get slowed in the damage debuff. In either case, it's not something that I would want either of the debuffs on, and it is unfortunate that it doesn't purge everything off. But at the same time, even purging one of those elements off is really good against him. Furthermore, against Slardar, as I mentioned, it does help against Slithering Crush. It helps me man mode, so he can't kite me. Slardar's stun is actually incredibly amazing. A lot of people don't know this, but it also, on top of stunning you, applies a movement speed slow and an attack speed slow, which, as I mentioned earlier, Broodmother is very, very, very weak against. She loves her attack speed, hates it when people take it away from her. Techies, possibly need no further explanation there. If I do, you might be in the wrong channel. This is a little bit maybe too veteran if you don't understand how BKB is good against techies. But then obviously Venge as well. Her stun, Magic Missile, is a very, very easily disjointable spell for things like Manta style or simply walking out of her vision for True Sight, but also BKB. When she casts the projectile, you simply pop BKB and you can disjoint it like that. She can still swap you, sure, but it's just very powerful to have that ability to say, hey, I don't care about any of your forms of crowd control in this game, I just want to go man mode. And that's what I'm trying to itemize towards, at least in this current instance where I still do a lot of damage. Next, I am kind of bouncing around my items. I don't actually have the idea of going Butterfly here, I just simply have it selected. You'll notice I also brought up Mjolnir. I don't think I was going to go Mjolnir. I think a better choice would have been Lotus Orb than both of those other two items, and I think that is actually what I end up going here. So Lotus Orb is great because against Vengeful Spirit, and I know this is going to sound like a big fat meme, but she actually can't really swap me, because if she swaps me, I swap her right back. That's just kind of, whatever. I'm not buying it for that reason, but that is a nice bonus. Against Ursa, when he gets his Abyssal Blade, and trust me, Ursas go Abyssal Blade. Even if he's going MKB first or BKB first for my plethora of ways of making him miss his attacks, such as Solar Crest plus Radiance plus Incap Bite, which I did talk about in my Broodmother guide, it's still a very solid item against the, not specifically Ursa, but just against their lineup in general, because like I mentioned, he will eventually get an Abyssal Blade. Shadow Fiends usually tend to get at least one item that affects you in a single target fashion. That can be a variety of different items. I know this is going to sound incredibly weird here, but I'm not actually joking in this regard, because the hero does lack crowd control in some way, shape, or form. I'm not going to say that something like a Scythe Shadow Fiend is the most popular item in the entire game, but I've seen it before. Sometimes they go with something like Bloodthorn. I don't know. The hero just tends to be a hero that, at least at some point in time, eventually, when he gets enough gold, and the hero does farm pretty quickly, eventually tends to get at least one item that just hits you single targetly. But again, I like to start with like the least important reasons, and I like to justify my way upwards from there. So then we get into the other heroes, like where techies will typically buy at least one item similar to Shadow Fiend, but even more often than not, an item that benefits his teams. So when I'm thinking of techies and how he buys an item that will single targetly screw somebody over in a team fight, I'm thinking of like Hex as a very common pickup on techies in the later stages of the game, so that he can provide something to his team, or something like Yule, so he can set up his silence. And I want to be able to kind of prevent that. Against Slider, obviously, it needs no introduction. It's a very, very powerful item against Slider. Purges off his ulti when he tries to apply it, or when he applies it to me previously. Like when I had applied it to me previously, and then when I'm running into fights, it will purge it off, or it won't purge it off, but it will reapply it to him, which is very powerful. And just in general, I think Lotus Orb provides a very nice, well-rounded amount of stats for the game that we're in. Right? It gives you 14, I believe, armor, the same as a Plate Mail. It gives 10. Sorry, I guess Plate Mail gives 10 armor, which against a lineup like theirs, like with Shadow Fiend, Hal from the Vengeful Spirit, and Slider with the amp damage, is nice. I am trying to bring my armor up to a respectable level, such that when I get affected by any of those debuffs, and obviously I don't plan to get affected by every single one of them. Another fun fact about Vengeful Spirit's Wave of Terror, or Hal as I call it, is that you can actually, I believe, purge it off with Lotus Orb. But even if I can't purge it off with Lotus Orb, say for instance I cast my Lotus Orb myself, and then she just casts Howl afterwards, so I'm not purging it off. Even in that instance, it's still very nice, because I get bonus armor from my Lotus Orb to help me negate the effects of it. Ideally, I'm just not at an armor value that's less than 10 in this game, because if I am, I'll get melted very quickly. Okay. So, with all of that being said, and moving back to the game state as is, hopefully it hasn't required too much of my commentary, but basically all we're trying to do here is play the techies waiting game, which basically means getting BKBs on heroes, securing all the objectives around the map. If we've taken a tier 3 tower, take their shrines. If we haven't, nonetheless, play around their jungle and try to look for picks, as well as take their farm. And then finally take Roche and try to push another tower. Now, it can be difficult to take these sorts of advantages, especially in a game where you're losing against the techies, but you have to keep in mind that techies makes the game somewhat of a 4v5. at least when his team is behind and you guys are threatening to push high ground. Most of his mines will be up on his high ground. You can take advantage of this by just not playing around that side of the map, right? If he's mostly mining his high ground in tier 3s, just don't go push him, right? It's a crazy concept. Let their waves push out and take their jungle such that you guys are still getting a lot of farm, and then you're eventually drawing the farm from them out of their tier 3 range / their base range in general. This will force them, if they want to get farmed, to actually come out of the base and fight those 4v5 team fights, because Techies isn't going to be with them. And if he is, I mean, it's a goddamn Techies, who cares, right? As long as he doesn't have the Hex like I was talking about earlier. That's kind of what we're trying to do. Communication isn't always the strongest in solo queue, and sometimes you'll have those situations where a teammate just wants the game to be over because Techies is a very difficult, or at least frustrating hero to play against. But in this situation, we played it pretty well, I'd say, and this was actually ended up being the good game-winning fight here. Ursa pauses the game because he's pretty freaking mad. I go ahead and say the Brood, though, save Lion, because if we scroll back, and this is a meme that I will scroll back for because it's a quality one. My Lion gets rooted, and I don't think he was sitting there disjoining the tower, so I was like, if I don't take the aggro here, he might get focused. So I wanted to focus, or I wanted to draw the aggro of the focus from the tower. Didn't really matter, probably. Maybe it wouldn't have, probably wouldn't have focused on him. Maybe it would have focused onto the OD because he was right-clicking the Lion, or the Venge, or whatever I think he was right-clicking in Ursa. But maybe it wouldn't have because he was actually right-clicking with his orb. Just some things to think about. Or maybe he wasn't because maybe he actually had it on autocast. I don't exactly know what his prerogative there was. Nonetheless, we take the tier 3 here, and now I was afraid to move over here because I knew that there was a Techies, and I was like, dog. That's a joke, boys. I wasn't actually afraid because I forgot. And that's another thing that Techies does, is he makes your brain melt. So I deserve to die there. I should have thought, oh man, I'm trying to push the mid tower that Techies has been focusing a lot of his minds towards. Regardless, this game is pretty much over. Now, don't write off mistakes like that. I should have known about that. That was pretty obvious, especially looking back, but even in the moment, I instantly thought, actually, I know this is going to sound like a really big meme, and I don't want to metagame this too hard, but I actually was thinking right as he blew up those mines, like, oh wait, there's a Techies in the game. But this game's over regardless. I don't think they can come back, but you should keep those sorts of things in mind, right? If I was a more critical player, and I liken myself to being one, right? I do actually genuinely think that was a mistake, and I do think that even as funny as that situation was, especially in this situation, I was thinking I should watch myself because this is certainly a game that they can still win, right? And I want to bring up my score here just to kind of show, like, I'm 17-2 right now. A more cocky player might have looked at that situation and been like, bah, who cares, right? It's whatever, you know, and that's a quality meme. But those are the sorts of plays that can happen. You know, I fed 1,700 gold, I believe, to the Techies. We can't see it because the bounty room spam, but that was quite a lot of gold that I just actually fed to the Techies here. So those are the sorts of things you need to be careful of. That all being said, I'm buying a pipe here specifically for that little fucker. By no means is pipe an amazing item in this game. It's definitely quality, at least against Shadow Fiend, and I would say it's like really good against Techies. But when an item is only really good against one of their heroes, I try to make sure that one of the heroes that it's really good against is a hero that's a problem. And the Techies is only part of the problem in this game. Like, if I itemized specifically to fuck over the Techies, like if instead of the Lotus Orb I went a pipe, this game might be a lot different. With all that being said, right, what I'm trying to do, this is one of the nice things about pipe as a last item, is that when you pop it, and I'm not trying to say that pipe is a useless item as a standalone item, but I don't really care too much about any of the base stats that it gives. Sure, that's a lot of spell resistance, but I'm mostly popping it to give my team that extra little bit of survivability against their Techie mines. Now, granted, if we're fighting in an isolated area where I can expect a lot of mines to be, 400 extra barrier block against magic damage isn't going to make the difference if he has 2,000 damage worth of mine sitting in one place, but it's just going to help my supports, specifically Lion and Ricky, not die from one mine. And you'll notice he didn't die from one mine, and I definitely did give him the pipe proc there. It's just a nice thing to be able to pop this and swap it out for another active item that you have, such as cheese, which I don't think I need to explain myself. Cheese is probably an objectively more powerful item than pipe, at least in this instance, where it's like, okay, Shadow Fiend's the only one alive, he doesn't have any crowd control, so when I get really low, I can pop it instantly with no fear and survive and continue to man fight him. And I think we don't get the opportunity to really show that off here, but the fact still remains that these are sorts of plays that you should be looking to make in this new 7.02 patch, where these sorts of things are possible. With all that being said, though, again, 4 of their heroes are dead, and this is just a situation where I don't think they can really come back from. So we're going to come up here and take off this last tower and get the racks for the GG. I don't really feel like this is really a constructive game to look at it much anymore, so I will go ahead and times 8 it. At this point, it's really kind of just patenting out our score. If you guys have learned anything from this game so far, I don't suspect that you'll be able to learn anything else from the continuation of this replay. But again, you know, I want to be a little bit of a man of my word, and if we're going to look at a replay, I guess that entails the rest of it. Also, perhaps maybe you guys aren't entirely asleep yet, so this will help you get to sleep if you guys are just a little bit drowsy. We do a little bit of crap talking here because the Ricky actually did say that Broodmother was a bad pick, and the reasoning for that was simply that we had 2 invisible heroes in the game. I personally think that's really, really stupid to just simply say that Broodmother is entirely a terrible pick in this situation simply because he already picked Ricky. That's kind of like saying, wow, and I don't even know if I can come up with an analogy for this, but I can think of so many. I guarantee you if I wasn't on the spot. I guess in my opinion, that's kind of like saying something like peanut butter is completely useless here for this sandwich because I already have jelly. It's like, yeah, in some ways you could argue that having 2 invisible heroes makes their lives a little bit easier, somewhat similar to how the sandwich might already be kind of good if you have some jelly on it as a standalone. But adding a little bit of peanut butter never hurt anybody, right? Adding a secondary invisible hero never necessarily hurt anybody. In some instances, it could enhance the experience a little bit, you know, bring a little bit more life to a situation that otherwise may be a little bit dull with only 1 invisible hero. Make their supports kind of keep guessing. Is it going to taste too jammy this time, or am I going to get a little bit of sweetness from that peanut butter? You know, am I going to be able to experience a type of versus invisible experience that I've never experienced before, where I'm constantly buying sentries and dust and gems such that I end the game with tranquil boots, 4 staff. Actually, this is a hefty amount of farm. Probably explains why she was having so much trouble dealing with the old invisible Broodmother, because she went through the entire game buying a little more. Oh, that's a fair amount of sentries. Those gold talents, right? I feel like I'm just running myself into a hole here because everything that I'm saying is getting called into question. Does she have a gold talent? She doesn't even have a gold talent. Okay, well, I'm going to end this there before I sound any more stupid. Anyways, I hope this was a good look at. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. If you didn't, I'll probably quit doing it if I realize this video is only getting 500 views and like 3 likes and 1 person saying this was a really quality meme. Wired. I really enjoyed both the educational element and the ASMR element. It helped me go to sleep and get better at Dota. And yeah, so that's the meme here. I really do appreciate you guys staying until the end, though, regardless of whether or not you enjoyed it. Much love to you all, and have a good night.